there's going to be one unexpected villain on your journey to becoming your best self, whatever that means for you, and that is your ego. It's unexpected because it's not always the antagonist. Actually, most of the time, it's your biggest help. It keeps you safe, it tells you who you are, and it helps you navigate the world. But sometimes it can just do too much. And it creates these illusions that you think are keeping you safe, but really they're keeping you stuck. And one of its sneakiest illusions is the identity trap. The identity trap is when your ego clings so tightly to a role, a version of yourself, or a title that you cannot be anything else. Maybe you're the friend who always has the answers, or you are the family member that's always available, or you are the person in the room that always makes everything look effortless. And you wear this identity like a shield or a badge of honor, right? But what happens when this identity no longer serves you? What if it starts holding you back from the life you're trying to create? What then? Movies are mirrors. So let's use them to talk about how to identify this identity trap. You ready? Okay, so let's talk about a cult classic. Is it cult classic or cult favorite? Let's talk about a cult favorite. Bring it on.
I'm sexy, I'm cute, I'm popular to boot. I'm bitchin', great hair, the boys all love to stare.
Let's start with the main character, Torrance. She believes that her worth comes from being the perfect team captain. She wears that identity like a badge of honor. And the problem is she takes on an identity that's already been mapped out. Because the Toros already have an expectation of what their team captain should look like, her identity has to follow that same layout.
If I made any mistake as a squad leader, it wasn't borrowing cheers. It was announcing you as my successor.
Not cool.
She has to be successful and she has to stick with what works. But when Torrance realizes that the routines that brought them to the championship last year were stolen from the Clovers, her identity is in direct conflict with her inner integrity. So this identity that she's built her life around, right? Like even at one point she says, I am cheerleading. It's been shaken up because she wants to be a good captain, but she wants to be a good captain on her own accord. And this year, the Clovers make sure they're going to hold her to that.
Our game is bad, we're without peers, so get that weakness out of here. Try to steal our bit, but you look like shit. We're the ones who are down with it.
Or we can also look at Woody from Toy Story, okay? Because he's convinced that his value comes from being Andy's favorite toy. But then Buzz Lightyear shows up and everything Woody's believed about himself gets called into question. Woody holds on tight to this identity he's created for himself, but his trouble comes when he's forced to compete for that identity. And because of that, it backs him against the wall where he ends up feeling jealous and even afraid.
They'll see. They'll see. I'm still Andy's favorite toy.
And we can also talk about the Great Gatsby. Gatsby built himself up from nothing, from being a poor soldier to a wealthy man who throws lavish parties every night. He was able to physically actualize everything he needed to become a wealthy man. But he didn't have Daisy, who was the actual physical actualization of that dream for him. Gatsby's ego is tied to the idea of what a wealthy man looks like. So when the cause of his wealth comes under scrutiny, he starts to feel shame, fear, and guilt because deep down he's unsure if he can sustain this identity he's built his life on.
Some vision of himself that he had put into loving Daisy. He was a penniless young man with only that grand vision of himself.
Daisy, don't scamper.
I was not, Mother.
So all of these characters throughout their stories eventually get stuck in the identity trap. They've tied their perceived sense of self to a single role or idea, whether it's being the champion or being the best or being the wealthiest. And as soon as that identity is challenged or threatened, everything else comes crashing down. So in our lives, the first step to getting unstuck from this trap is to ask yourself a few things. Are there any roles that I've tied my worth to? Do I feel worthy because I'm the smartest? Do I feel worthy because I'm the fastest? And what am I afraid of losing if I lose that role? If I'm not the smartest, do I lose respect? If I'm not the fastest, do I lose my place? And which of these am I holding on to so tightly that it's holding me back from what I actually want? These are kind of hard questions, but they're so necessary in order to take the next step. Because I'll tell you, if you don't take the next step and you get stuck in this trap, what it feels like. Okay? When you're stuck in this trap, you get hit with a crippling fear of change. And you feel just like super anxious about stepping outside of the role that you built for yourself. You also get hit with the feeling of stagnation. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, think, you feel like you can't move forward. You feel unfulfilled and you're trying all these things and you can't move forward. You feel inauthentic. All the actions you take don't feel aligned with who you truly are. So you probably experience a lot of cognitive dissonance, but you keep going in that direction because you feel like you have to maintain a certain image. Like you could feel frustrated or angry because you feel stuck in this cycle of validation. Just like when Woody was frustrated dealing with his jealousy. You'll need physical things outside of you to verify this identity constantly. And you'll feel frustrated when you don't have it or you feel like you have less. You can also feel guilty, like deep shame. Kind of like how Torrance was when she couldn't live up to the identity of being the perfect team captain. You'll start to feel like you're failing because you couldn't live up to this identity that someone had set before you. And failing at that, because it's so closely intertwined with your identity, feels like you're failing yourself. And so this shame is like twice as much. And you'll also feel extremely anxious and feel like you're just losing everything. Kind of like after the incident when Gatsby waited outside Daisy's house all night, that identity becomes something you feel like you fear living without, which means you will always fear losing everything else that comes with it. So now let's talk about how to start stepping out of this identity ego trap so you can continue on your way, right? The first step is what we're doing right here. Awareness is the first step to breaking out of the identity ego trap. It happens so often that we don't even realize that we're in it, or how tightly we've tied our sense of self into a specific role. And because of that, we don't realize it until it's been challenged or taken away from us. For example, when the new cheer initiate took Torrance on that little ride to go see the Clovers, that was a rude awakening. She realized really quick that her squad wasn't good because they were good team captains, but her squad was good because the Clovers team captain was a good team captain.
Like every time we get some, here y'all come trying to steal it, putting some blonde hair on it, and calling it something different. We've had the best squad around for years, but no one's been able to see what we can do. Oh, but you better believe all that's gonna change this year. I'm captain.
I swear I had no idea.
Well, now you do.
That caused her to realize that the identity she had wasn't all she thought it was. Because of all those things, she gained awareness that she had a very narrow view of success. And that vision she had of her winning at all costs made her leadership inauthentic. Her breakthrough really comes when she redefines success, right? And she embraces leadership as a way to inspire the creativity in her teammates, even if they push back.
These are not spirit fingers. These are spirit fingers.
Number 2 on how to step out of the identity ego trap is that you have to break free from the grip that external validation has on you. You have to stop looking at external factors to prove that identity back to you. Whether it's you need the validation from other people or you need the validation in physical means. You have to build that self-worth from within. Like Gatsby, right? He is the perfect cautionary tale. He relentlessly pursued wealth and Daisy's love to prove that he had the identity of a wealthy man. He needed Daisy loving him to prove that he had made it. Built a whole house across the street from her, just hoping one day she would come over. And the story teaches us that if he would have been fulfilled from within with the fact that he was self-made, even if it was under questionable circumstances, right? And that's probably part of the reason why he didn't feel fulfilled. His story might have ended up a little bit better off. So the next thing that you can do to start to get out of this identity trap is to consciously embrace change, because the identity trap feeds on that fear you have of change. And a lot of us think we're open-minded and open to change, but a lot of our egos say otherwise, and mostly because it's terrified. Letting go of an identity can feel so scary because you feel like you're losing yourself. And who knows what's on the other end of losing yourself? Because the one thing we feel like we have in life is knowledge of ourself. And so consciously embracing change as an opportunity to explore new dimensions of yourself is key. For example, Woody and Buzz. In the beginning, Woody clung on so tightly to his role as Andy's favorite, which led him to practically crashing out when Buzz entered the picture, right? Until Woody goes on a journey to realize that his worth isn't in favoritism or permanence. It's really about the present connection he's making and in the joy that he brings to the moment. And consciously allowing this shift is what helps Woody evolve and find a new role. And then number 4, once you consciously embrace change, you can start to redefine your identity. And I feel like I talked about this in my Inside Out video, the first one and Inside Out 2, where the idea is that you have to embrace the ego death. It doesn't always mean you have to create a whole new persona and become a new person overnight. It's about expanding your sense of self to include all the layers of who you are and not holding too rigidly to one role. Pretty much like, I'll go back to Bring It On, pretty much like Torrance. She redefined the identity, not just of herself as a cheer captain, but of her whole team. They learned things like ballroom dancing and watched movies to make their cheers better. Instead of just being the best with what they had, they embraced being creatives. So this is important, guys, because by stepping out of this identity trap, every time you hit this trap, you can learn to recognize it faster, let it go, and embrace the new. And that way you give yourself permission to expand, to become the biggest, most authentic version of yourself. You can be authentic and real and not just a carbon copy of who the last person was or who you think you're supposed to be. And I feel like this ties in so well to the Divergent series I've been breaking down on my Patreon and the whole process of individuation, so that we can actually bring back individuality, right? Because we can make life colorful again. We can be free to be ourselves. We don't have to fit ourselves in any box. And I make these videos because it's just so easy to get caught in that if we're not conscious of it. There's a good chance you might get stuck in this trap more than once. But hopefully this video gave you a little bit of the tools that you'll need to get unstuck. And if you need a little inspiration as to why it's important to get unstuck, you can check out the video I made about your hero's journey. Or if you need help getting out of the social comparison trap that we all fall into, you can watch this one here. Okay, love you. As always, I'm sending love and healing your way. Bye.